Today's lesson is all about area. When we're talking about area, we're looking for the space inside a closed object. Places that you might see area include carpeting and painting. Like if you're going to put carpeting or flooring down, you need to know how to find the area of a space. Formulas for area are given below. So here are 6 common shapes and their areas. At some point very soon, we'll write a test on this. And just like usual, you won't get the formulas, but you'll get a study sheet. And you can put whatever you want on that study sheet. So I fully expect that you are going to put these formulas on your study sheet. So keep this lesson handy because you'll be using it probably throughout this unit, including making that study sheet. So here we go. First up, we have a square. A square is a 4-sided shape with the same side length all the way around, 90-degree angles. The area of a square is s squared. So if the side length is 10, it's 10 squared. 10 squared means 10 times 10, which is 100. Area of a rectangle has 2 pairs of equal sides. It's just length times width. Triangle, the area is half the base times the height. Sometimes you might have learned it a little differently. You might have learned it as base times height divided by 2. Those both mean the exact same things, and you'll get the exact same answer if you do it. So whatever you're more comfortable with, either way is fine. Either 1/2 the base times the height, or base times height divided by 2. We also have the parallelogram. The best way I can describe the parallelogram is it's like a rectangle. It's like a rectangle that's kind of tipped over a bit. The formula for the area of a parallelogram is base times height. The trusty circle. The area of a circle is pi r squared. And when we talked about circumference, there was 2 formulas. One if you knew the radius, and one if you knew the diameter. Here, we don't have that such luxury. There's just a formula for the radius. So that means if you're given the diameter, you got to divide it by 2 to figure out the radius, and then use that in this formula. And our friend, the trapezoid, that I worked with the grade 11s this morning on their volume, and the trapezoid is basically 2 parallel sides that are separated, and the formula is a little bit more complex than the other ones. The formula is half of a plus b times h. A is one of the parallel sides. B is the other parallel side. So you add them together, you divide by 2, and you multiply by the height. That's the area of a trapezoid. Okay? All right. Let's do a few examples. Straightforward, we've got 2 shapes here. First up, what's our shape? Rectangle. So the formula for area of a rectangle is length times width. So that's 14.4 times 2.5. And if my math is right, that's 36 meters squared. So a couple things on this. So I mostly am talking about my other class, but it'll apply to you now that we're getting into this. If you forget your units, which is this little guy right here, the meter squared, if you forget or screw up your units, you will lose a half a mark. Now, if you're doing a quiz or an assignment, and I see you do that multiple times, I'll probably only penalize you once, but I'll still penalize you. Okay? So don't forget the units. When we're talking about area, and that is what we're talking about here, We are talking about meters squared. Okay? We are talking about meters squared. Everything is squared. If we're talking about centimeters, then we're talking about centimeters squared. If we're talking about feet, then we're talking about feet squared. Part B. What do we have here?
Triangle.
Cool. Formula for area of a triangle is 1/2 the base times the height. The base is 6.8. The height is 3.3. So we're going to take our calculator here and we're going to go 6.8 times 3.3 divided by 2. And when we do that, we get 11.22 centimeters squared. When you deal with these questions, especially when you're dealing with circles, where you'll get lots of decimal places, the general rule I want you to follow is you probably don't need to put anything more than 2 decimal places. Here, there's exactly 2 decimal places, but if we're dealing with a circle, it'll fill our calculator screen, and what I'm telling you is round your answer to the nearest 2 decimal places. Okay? So now here we got 2 more things. Here we've got a circle, and the formula for area of a circle is pi r squared. What's the radius?
4.5.
You betcha. We follow order of operations, which means we do the squaring before we multiply by pi. 4.5 squared is 20.25. And we're going to multiply pi by that. And when we do that, if we round to 2 decimal places, we get 63.62 centimeters squared. That's the area of that circle. I always write down the formula before I start to figure out the area of each of these shapes. The reason I do that is so that I remember these formulas when I go to do other questions. You'll always have your notes or your study sheet beside you, and that certainly is a nice comforting thing to have, but it's a lot easier if you can actually just remember these. And I know you probably do know some of these, but if you write down the formulas a few times, you'll go from kind of remembering them to remembering most of them, and maybe only needing to glance at your study sheet or formulas once in a while. Okay, now here's an interesting question. It gives us the area, and it gives us one of the lengths, and we need to figure out the other one. So, this is a rectangle. Formula for area of a rectangle is length times width. The area is 56. The length is 16. We do not know the width. So we are going to figure out the width. And the way we're going to do that is we're going to divide both sides by 16, which will leave us W on the right side. And then we are going to go ahead and just divide 56 divided by 16. And W is 3.5. Now this is not an area, so it wouldn't be squared. It would just be meters. So the width of that rectangle is 3.5 meters. All right, we got one more example, I believe. Here it is right here. Find the shaded area. So we have a square with a circular part cut out of it. So we need to first figure out the area of the square. Formula for that is s squared. What's s? What's the side length of the square?
10.
It is 10, so we're going to do 10 squared. Sometimes people think 10 squared is 20. Just remember, squared means multiplied by itself. 10 times 10 is 100 centimeters squared. Now, the square has a big circle cut out of it. And the formula for area of a circle is pi r squared. The radius here is what? Five. So it's going to be pi times 5 squared. 5 squared is what? 25, right? And then we're going to multiply 25 by pi. And we get 78.54 centimeters squared. To find out that yellow or shaded area, it's going to be 100 minus 78.54, which is going to give us 21.46 centimeters squared. And that will be our answer.